Welcome back to the alternative reality. Today we're going to be talking about Ukraine, but first I'm going to add a little backstory. So I spent quite a long time trying to get this video all together, and amongst various health issues I also had to get my wisdom teeth pulled out, so if you notice that my face is swollen, that is why. Some of this video will have clips of me before I had my wisdom teeth pulled, and then clips of me after I had my wisdom teeth pulled. And the reason for that is because I've taken multiple shots of this video to get it perfect for you guys. Also, this is just a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, especially in wanting to be accurate and tell the truth. Most things that you want to do right, though, are hard. So, it's an uphill battle, but I'm working on it and I'm figuring it out. I definitely have figured out some tricks. Didn't even think to use hashtags because for me that's the pound sign and I never remember that it exists as anything else. You know, part of me kind of wanted to give up on it a little bit, and for some reason I just can't do it. I just can't stop thinking about it. I can't sleep sometimes. I just think about what I'm going to do next. I think it's a universal calling for me. I kept saying this is really what I want to do. No, this is what I have to do. I'm just too committed to the truth to keep it to myself. Edge, no matter what, to try and get us back to the reality that we came from. Sometimes I almost feel like we're Marty McFly in that Back to the Future movie when, I think it's the first one, he gets the gambling book and Biff takes it back and it ends up being an alternate reality and he gets back there. Things have gone horribly, horribly wrong. I'm pretty sure you probably all knew where I was going with that when I said Marty McFly, but anyway, that's what I feel like sometimes. While I was recovering and getting teeth pulled, I dove into the rabbit hole of Ukraine. So here we go.
I am concerned about the expansion of NATO. NATO has expanded into 13 countries, up to the borders of Russia. 13 countries.
Эта тема очень опасная. Это тема войны. Вообще, война между Россией и Соединенными Штатами вообще это безумие.
We're going to talk a little bit about NATO. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was created in 1949 by the United States, Canada, and several other Western European nations to provide collective security against the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union ended in 1991, so you ask, why is it still around? Well, according to this, from Brookings, from this perspective, NATO's fundamental purpose after the Cold War would shift from defending common territory to defending the common interest of alliance members. Canada, US, and the western parts of Europe first formed NATO to protect from the Soviet Union. Now, the Soviet Union fell in 1991, and you guys probably remember Trump saying this.
I have been very, very direct with Secretary Stoltenberg and members of the alliance in saying that NATO members must finally contribute their fair share and meet their financial obligations. But 23 of the 28 member nations are still not paying what they should be paying and what they are supposed to be paying for their defense. This is not fair to the people and taxpayers of the United States. And many of these nations owe massive amounts of money from past years and not paying in those past years. Over the last 8 years, the United States spent more on defense than all other NATO countries combined. If all NATO members had spent just 2% of their GDP on defense last year, we would have had another $119 billion for our collective defense and for the financing of additional NATO reserves.
There is literally no other way for me to put this in here. Believe me, I've tried. Found the file, the Hunter Biden Charisma and Corruption, the Impact on U.S. Government Policy and Related Concerns, U.S. Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, U.S. Senate Committee on Finance Majority Staff Report. So this is the final Hunter Biden report. I wish it was like in a big manila envelope and I could be like, I got it, oh, I wish it was in a big manila envelope where I could be like, I got it, I got it. I found the Hunter Biden Burisma Homeland Security official report. And I read the whole thing. Nothing, I'm just super proud of myself. No, but seriously, that is what I'll be using for most of the information in this video, along with a documentary called Ukraine on Fire. It was labeled documentary / propaganda, but then again, Making a Murder on Netflix was just a documentary, so who's to say? Anyway, I'll be linking all of that in the description below. Let's continue.
Crowds of people descended upon Kiev, marking the start of the Orange Revolution. At that time, Ukraine became once again a battlefield of two forces, the Russian and Western governments.
So back to Ukraine, 2014, riots begin. Now, if you go back to that handy-dandy report that I have, that is about the exact time that Biden gets Ukraine handed to him. The report also notes that it was very awkward for the Biden administration to have Hunter Biden on the board of Burisma, considering Joe Biden was the vice president at the time and also his father. Really? That was awkward? Hunter's not the only one that has special privileges, is he?
With a very special new governor appointed on May 30th of 2015. Mikhail Saakashvili, an old friend of the United States and born and raised in Ukraine's neighboring country, Georgia.
A little hoedown there in Georgia.
A quick look at his biography gives one an understanding that he's been groomed for a special mission. Mr. Saakashvili received a U.S. State Department scholarship, and he worked for a New York law firm which represented the organization Kamara, a group that appeared earlier when we learned about the color revolutions.
We are dealing with democratic, bloodless revolution.
This is the Revolution of Roses, and this is Mikhail Saakashvili with Kamara, busy overthrowing the legitimately elected president, Eduard Shevardnadze.
Remove the government by peaceful means. That's classics, you're really European, I'm proud.
Soon after the Rose Revolution blossomed fully, Georgia announced its intentions to join NATO and plant fresh NATO military bases in the fertile soil right on Russia's border.
Never ever we will give our freedom and independence. Never ever will give any piece of our territory.
Saakashvili's mission was accomplished, at least with his friends in NATO. The Georgian populace wasn't quite as happy, though. In 2007, they took to the streets to voice discontent, and Mr. Saakashvili responded with force. The people's discontent grew. Saakashvili's party lost parliamentary elections, and the opposition took control.
He said this means that the parliamentary majority should set up a new government and me as the president, according to our constitution.
Mikhail decided not to wait for the results of the president's election and fled the country in October 2013. In 2014, Saakashvili refused summons to appear in court as a witness in several criminal cases. Later that same year, he was accused of misuse of power and embezzlement. Saakashvili wound up in the U.S., and soon his friends in Washington found him a new assignment. Mikhail actively supported Maidan, and very soon was rewarded with a high position in the new Ukrainian government. First as the president's counselor, and then as the governor of Odessa. The day before taking this position, he renounced his citizenship to Georgia, the country of his birth, and became a Ukrainian citizen.
Я навсегда останусь гордым гражданином моей гордой родины. Гордым гражданином моей гордой родины.
As they say, the battle is worth the blood, both literally and figuratively.
Я прекрасно знаю реальную цену реформ господина Саакашвили. Я прекрасно знаю то, что он на Украине на самом деле является частью проекта, который нужно осуществить Украине определенным силам.
Jeffrey Pyatt, the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, paid a visit to Saakashvili just a month after he took office in Odessa.
But as long as the Oblast administration is delivering results on Ukraine, you are going to see a steady flow of embassy and Washington visitors coming here.
The meeting was fruitful, and Jeffrey generous. No matter how well Saakashvili's job goes, it looks like he shouldn't be worried about his own finances. On his Facebook page, he posted an official document showing that the new governor of Odessa gets a pretty penny from Washington, almost $200,000 a year. For comparison, the governor of Maine gets $70,000 a year. So if Odessa became a new U.S. state, it would be at the top of the list. Mr. Saakashvili should feel right at home in his newly adopted country. He is best of friends with fellow color revolutionary leader Viktor Yushchenko, who's the godfather of his son.
Губернатором Одесской области назначен бывший президент Саакашвили. Это просто плевок, оскорбление одесситам, да и всему украинскому народу. Ему не дали даже рабочую визу в США. Университеты, в которых его пытались трудоустроить, не захотели его брать на постоянную работу. Значит, исполнять обязанности губернатора Одессы он может. А что, нет порядочных, профессиональных и способных выполнять такую работу украинцев?
People would call a very dark history for Ukraine. Add some texture to Ukraine. They did some pretty terrible things for Germany, that's for sure.
The most radical nationalistic part of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists got its own leader, Stepan Bandera. Severely anti-Semitic and anti-communist, he proclaimed an independent Ukraine in 1941. His German allies frowned upon such an act of self-will, and it landed him in prison for nearly all the Second World War. Not participating in the events physically, Bandera still managed to successfully spread his ideology. Many independent historians estimate that the OUN militia exterminated from 150 to 200,000 Jews on Ukrainian territory occupied by the Germans by the end of 1941. The most notorious and outrageous massacre took place September 29th and 30th, 1941, in Babi Yar, Kiev. All kikes of the city of Kiev and its vicinity must appear on Monday, September 29th by 8 o'clock in the morning. Bring documents, money, and valuables, and also warm clothing, linen, etc. Any kikes who do not follow this order and are found elsewhere will be shot. 33,771 Jews were killed in this two-day operation of the Nazis and Ukrainian militia. Another outrageous massacre was carried out by the Ukrainian Insurgent Army and the Bandera faction of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists in German-occupied Polish Volhynia and eastern Galicia between 1943 and 1944. This genocide of Poles was led by Mykola Lebed. 35,000 to 60,000 people in Volhynia and 25 to 40,000 in eastern Galicia fell victim to this massive ethnic cleansing operation.
Hey, you guys remember when they were calling all those politicians, and a lot of them being conservatives, anti-Semitists or racists? Turns out that's perfectly okay. In fact, we even fund it. As long as you're in Ukraine, we fund anti-Semitism and racism.
November 21st, 2013, 3 new TV channels went on the air and suddenly became stunningly popular in Ukraine. Spilno TV, November 21st. Hromadske TV, November 22nd. And Espresso TV, November 24th, directly from opposition protest. These channels went viral, supporting the protests and encouraging more and more people to come to Maidan.
Второе нападение. Protesters with clubs
happened in the early morning hours. The eyewitnesses that were there said that the police did use.
Coincidentally, Sergei Lovochkin is a close associate to many U.S. politicians. And most ominously, a group of well-trained young men arrived to Maidan almost simultaneously with the riot police. They infiltrated the crowd and began provocations with insults, stones, and torches.
The right sector in Ukraine represents a part of the Ukrainian population that has often favored fairly extreme right-wing positions. So the demonstrations went from being relatively peaceful political protests to being increasingly violent.
The violence started to take off when?
Фактически жесткие противоправные действия начались уже в декабре 2013 года. События, которые проходили в тот период в Киеве, они были очень радикальные. В них принимали неонацистские организации, молодые люди, которые были вооружены различными средствами. Технологии, которые применялись в тот период времени, они были заранее спланированы.
As veiled and masked as the color revolutions can be, an attentive viewer can see subtle patterns and similarities revealing their true nature. To make crowds act as one obedient group, they have to be united at the unconscious level. The masterminds of color revolutions know this well and have perfected the art. Symbolism is one of the most powerful tools to achieve this end. Revolutionary political organizations with surprisingly similar names and even more similar logos have
Recognize that symbol? Remember the George Floyd riots and how those were funded by the United States. Turns out the United States also funds riots in other countries.
Appeared time and again, almost as omens marking the countries that would be hit by the colored plague next. They are often described as being aware and active, when they're actually trained and radical. They are the ones who take the first shot, literal and metaphorical, to transform the peaceful protests into full-blown coups d'etats. Their fingerprints can be found everywhere on the map of the color revolutions. Using all the experience of past generations, simple but effective tools like catchy sing-alongs and chanting are employed. Well known for exciting the crowd and creating a group identity, they depersonalize individuals and make them easier to manipulate. Incidentally, one such organization, Hromadske TV, received generous donations from the Dutch and U.S. embassies, as well as from the Renaissance Foundation, an NGO founded by George Soros.
Okay, so if you don't know who George Soros is, he is a Hungarian-American billionaire. His worth is worth $6.7 billion. He is what we call part of the deep state.
I set up a foundation in Ukraine before Ukraine became independent of Russia. And the foundation has been functioning ever since. And it played an important part in events now.
Part of events now, he says.
I like criticism, but it must be my way.
Did you see any evidence of U.S. involvement? Did you feel their presence from the U.S.?
Очень частыми гостями были представители Соединенных Штатов, конгрессмены, были госпожа Нуланд, приезжала очень часто, у нас были с ней дискуссии. Но после этих дискуссий она шла на Майдан и поддерживала протестующих. И обвиняла правоохранительные органы, применялась чрезмерно сила. На самом деле, эти все месседжи мы видели на Майдане.
Well, members of Congress were visiting Ukraine during that period, most famously Congressman John McCain. So some of the people who were challenging their government, their elected government at that point, were being told by the senior U.S. official, a person who ran for president and a top...
Dude, that guy is so creepy. I'm sorry, but do you see him smiling? Like, if that is not a lizard person wearing human skin, I don't know what is.
Official in the U.S. Congress, that the U.S. was with them.
I'm Senator John McCain, and it's always a pleasure to be back in Ukraine.
Senator McCain was, in a sense, giving the people in the Maidan a feeling that they had the backing of the most powerful country on earth.
This is about the future you want for your country. This is about the future you deserve.
Делегаций много приезжало. Я говорил, что нельзя говорить, во-первых, неправду. Нельзя становиться на сторону митингующих и отстаивать их права, создавая тем самым и углубляя конфликт.
Basically, the United States took the side of the protesters. Surprise, surprise, they took the side of radical people who don't really no idea what they're actually fighting for or protesting.
Voters will decide Sunday whether they'll leave Ukraine and join Russia.
The campaign with the slogan "Together with Russia" has the backing of Moscow.
The Crimea situation, the referendum, is also happening during this period very quickly.
Крымский референдум инициировали жители Крыма. Это была их реакция на попытки представителей Майдана устроить такой Майдан в Крыму. Это не секрет, что население Крыма всегда
rejecting the new government in Kiev. On February 27th, the government buildings in the capital of Crimea were seized by pro-Russian protesters. The current Crimean government was dismissed, and the new leader, Sergei Aksyonov, was assigned as the leader of the Crimean Autonomous Republic. Was held, and the people voted to leave Ukraine and enter the Russian Federation.
The situation in Crimea is being presented as a Russian invasion. And again, nobody who looks at this seriously and looks at the poll numbers, some of the poll numbers done by the US government agencies themselves, showing that the people of Crimea preferred being part of Russia. In the US news media, it has all been presented as the Russians invaded. They then staged a sham election with people with guns at their backs. Somehow they faked the ballot boxes to get 96% approval for rejoining Russia.
The idea of a referendum in Crimea is just quite simply unconstitutional.
It does raise questions on whether this vote really is free and fair, especially given the heavy military presence in Crimea right now, Errol.
So that's how it's been sold to the American people. The reality is very different.
Что такое демократия? Демократия – это политика, основанная на воле народа. Как выясняется воля народа? В современном мире с помощью голосования. Люди пришли свыше 90%, и свыше 90% проголосовали за присоединение к России. Нужно уважать выбор людей. Не подстраивать каждый раз под свои геополитические интересы, международное право и принципы демократии. У нас не было там никаких боевых действий. Там никто не стрелял. Никто никого не убивал.
I'll read you the definition of democracy, which is what supposedly NATO's job is to uphold democracy values and principles. A system of a government by the whole population or all the eligible members of the state. A government by the people, rule of the majority. A government in which the superpower is vested in the people and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held free elections. If NATO's job is to uphold democracy, and we no longer live in a democracy, and by the way, neither does the UK, Canada, or any part of Europe, we are all headed into a socialistic society, and it's happening really fast. We are no longer a democracy. Most socialistic societies end up inevitably in poverty. You know, you might get to own your Tupperware and clothes in a socialistic society, but other than that, they own your car, they own your house, they own your money, they own everything. They own your kids. And you don't think that if Joseph Stalin, there weren't children working in his factories? Of course there were. If they didn't have free time, they didn't have leisurely time. You will live in a society where you will have no time and no privacy and nothing for yourself. Perfect example, we are not a capitalistic democracy anymore. We are driving very quickly into a socialistic society. And here's a brief clip.
We found a homeless person living in an abandoned $10,000 penthouse. Brew, it's nicer than my penthouse. This bathroom was updated recently too. Like half the skyscrapers here are abandoned. Where are the workers today?
Like, bro, that's not capitalism. That looked like something, a video that you would have taken after World War II going through Russia. Our country is in such distress, but we're still funding all of these overseas wars. Cross-reference that bill that they're trying to federally pass where it would make any president after Biden impeached if they are not going to fund Ukraine, and they are currently sending Ukraine $60 billion in this new bill. And while we're on the topic of money, indeed, what is going on in Ukraine? Speaking of funding their weapons, where are they all going? Fighting to be part of NATO to get away from communist Russia. And for what?
The U.S. and NATO remain locked in a standoff with Russia over Ukraine.
Our analysts indicate that they remain very much in a threatening position.
Yesterday, Russian leader Vladimir Putin said he's open to talks aimed at averting a war. Putin said Russia is pulling back some of the soldiers it had deployed along the Ukrainian border.
There's been a response from the opposition, but yes, I'm sorry, from Hamas. But it seems to be a little over the top. We're not sure where it is. There's a continuing negotiation right now.
Mr. President, if this bill fails, would you consider supporting something separate that just addresses Israel or Ukraine?
I'm not going to concede that now. We need it all. The rest of the world's looking at us, and they really are.
It's worthwhile with all of this gaining, some steam and public perception to be clear on some facts. First and foremost, the vast majority of this money is going to American companies and jobs, right? Because those are the people who are making the Abrams tanks, the ammo, and everything else. And we take Lockheed Martin, which makes the HIMARS that have been core to Ukraine's counteroffensive. The company announced it's going to increase its workforce in Camden, Arkansas by 20% just because of this new demand. That money's going to America.
Really? I thought we were funding Ukraine and giving them weapons so they could fight communist Russia, be part of NATO, and fight for their freedom of democracy. Some might say we are the communists. Folks, the only war that's going on in Ukraine is the imaginary one that has been put on by America propaganda. Because the elite, aka the deep state, aka the Illuminati, aka lizard people, have a bunch of shit over there that they don't want Russia to get their hands on them. Ukraine's like Treasure Island for the elite, basically. They're just keeping everything over there, and they'll do anything to keep everybody away from it. They'll trick an entire country to make us believe that Vladimir Putin is a bad man. As you probably all know by now, Tucker Carlson did an interview with Vladimir Putin.
We're in Moscow tonight. We're here to interview the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. We'll be doing that soon. There are risks to conducting an interview like this, obviously, so we thought about it carefully over many months. Here's why we're doing it. First, because it's our job. We're in journalism. Our duty is to inform people. 2 years into a war that's reshaping the entire world, most Americans are not informed. They have no real idea what's happening in this region, here in Russia or 600 miles away in Ukraine. But they should know. They're paying for much of it in ways they might not fully yet perceive. The war in Ukraine is a human disaster. It's left hundreds of thousands of people dead, an entire generation of young Ukrainians, and it's depopulated the largest country in Europe. But the long-term effects are even more profound. This war has utterly reshaped the global military and trade alliances, and the sanctions that followed have as well. And in total, they have upended the world economy. The post-World War II economic order, the system that guaranteed prosperity in the West for more than 80 years, is coming apart very fast, and along with it, the dominance of the US dollar. These are not small changes. They are history-altering developments. They will define the lives of our grandchildren. Most of the world understands this perfectly well. They can see it. Ask anyone in Asia or the Middle East what the future looks like. And yet the populations of the English-speaking countries seem mostly unaware. They think that as nothing has really changed. And they think that because no one has told them the truth. Their media outlets are corrupt. They lie to their readers and viewers. And they do that mostly by omission. For example, since the day the war in Ukraine began, American media outlets have spoken to scores of people from Ukraine, and they have done scores of interviews with Ukrainian President Zelensky. We ourselves have put in a request for an interview with Zelensky, and we hope he accepts. But the interviews he's already done in the United States are not traditional interviews. They are fawning pep sessions specifically designed to amplify Zelensky's demand that the U.S. enter more deeply into a war in Eastern Europe and pay for it. That is not journalism. It is government propaganda. Propaganda of the ugliest kind, the kind that kills people. At the same time, our politicians and media outlets have been doing this, promoting a foreign leader like he's a new consumer brand. Not a single Western journalist has bothered to interview the president of the other country involved in this conflict, Vladimir Putin. Most Americans have no idea why Putin invaded Ukraine or what his goals are now. They've never heard his voice. That's wrong. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in, and we have the right to tell them about it because we are Americans too. Freedom of speech is our birthright. We were born with the right to say what we believe. That right cannot be taken away no matter who is in the White House. But they're trying anyway. Almost 3 years ago, the Biden administration illegally spied on our text messages and then leaked the contents to their servants in the news media. They did this in order to stop a Putin interview that we were planning. Last month, we're pretty certain they did exactly the same thing once again. But this time, we came to Moscow anyway. We are not here because we love Vladimir Putin. We are here because we love the United States, and we want it to remain prosperous and free. We paid for this trip ourselves. We took no money from any government or group, nor are we charging people to see the interview. It is not behind a paywall. Anyone can watch the entire thing, shot live to tape and unedited, on our website, tuckercarlson.com. Elon Musk, to his great credit, has promised not to suppress or block this interview once we post it on his platform, X, and we're grateful for that. Western governments, by contrast, will certainly do their best to censor this video on other less principled platforms because that's what they do. They are afraid of information they can't control. But you have no reason to be afraid of it. We are not encouraging you to agree with what Putin may say in this interview, but we are urging you to watch it. You should know as much as you can. And then, like a free citizen and not a slave, you can decide for yourself. Thanks.
Truly inspirational and brave move on Tucker Carlson's behalf. We should all aspire to be so bold. Vladimir Putin did an excellent job clearing up a lot of conservative, or as I like to call us, normal people, suspicions. And the radical left did an excellent job tearing it into teeny tiny pieces for the snowflake's mental digestive system.
Well, Donald Trump is not Vladimir Putin's only friend in America right now. As a noted conspiracy theorist and vocal critic of U.S. support to Ukraine, Tucker Carlson is already well known as a bit of a Kremlin mouthpiece. So in his 2-hour interview with Vladimir Putin in Moscow this week, it's no surprise he mostly just sat there as Putin effectively steamrolled him with revisionist history and disinformation. Now, Tucker can take some modicum of credit for asking Putin to release Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who's an actual reporter who's been wrongfully detained in Russia on false charges of espionage. But for the most part, this wasn't an interview at all. It was a platform. And by giving Putin that platform without pushing back on many of the most outrageous claims, Tucker handed Putin a big PR victory. Notably, Tucker did not challenge Putin's baseless accusation that the United States orchestrated a coup in Ukraine in 2014. He was also silent when Putin made the obviously false historical claim that Poland, not Nazi Germany, was responsible for starting World War II. At the same time, Tucker never called Putin's unprovoked attack on Ukraine an invasion. He never asked about Russian atrocities or the targeting of civilian infrastructure. He never asked about Putin's political crackdowns or Russia's rigged elections or his assault on democratic institutions around the world.
Time for a new segment I like to call Heroes into Villains, because I feel like I'm not alone in this, where we've all been around long enough and Hollywood's been around long enough for us to watch all of our heroes turn into villains. And on this week's episode, our honorary guest is Seth MacFarlane. Now, you might remember me playing this clip in last week's episode.
Lysella, what can you tell us about your planet that might help us figure out a way to save John? Your world is hard to get a handle on.
How so?
Well, the voting and rating, those badges, you all wear them?
Yeah. You get one when you turn 18, and then you wear it for the rest of your life. It's how we can tell who's good and who's bad.
So this is an absolute democracy.
Yeah. How does your world work?
We select representatives who discuss issues and enact laws.
But what about everybody else? Everybody deserves a voice. That's what we're taught.
A voice should be earned, not given away.
How do you know what foods are healthiest for your children or what medicine to take if you're sick?
We vote.
I believe you are confusing opinion with knowledge.
I think what he's asking is, with so many voices at once, how do you filter out the truth?
Well, my dad always says the majority are the truth. I mean, you always know what the majority wants. That's what matters.
Well, you always know what the mob wants, too. And right now, the mob wants to lobotomize my navigator. Now, there must be some way to influence the mass perception before it's too late.
Well, everybody reads the master feed.
What's the master feed?
It's a continuously streaming opinion feed. We saw them everywhere.
Could this feed turn the public tide in John's favor?
Yeah, but everybody uses the feed. I mean, how are you going to get millions of people to change their minds?
I believe I have a suggestion.
This is an example from my perspective of how freedom of speech can be twisted into everybody's words having to be valued and nurtured, and therefore the evil gets nurtured and outpowers the good. In the episode, if you get too many downvotes because they are a 100% democracy, you will actually be turned into a mental vegetable, whether you're just being rude or you murder somebody. It was actually more of a jab on how these bleeding heart liberals believe that we have to value everybody's opinion and nurture everybody's opinion. And, oh, they had a bad childhood, so that's why they're a psychopath. That's not their fault. You know, and I feel like that's how we get into a very complicated a place of where the truth and the facts are no longer important, but everybody's opinion and feelings are important. Not everybody's words need to be valued. Everybody's words need to be evaluated. If they're good words, if they're good ideas, then we pursue them as a society. If they're not good words, if they're not good ideas, they are supposed to be lost and forgotten. Jordan Peterson says it best.
It's a dreadful error. The question is, what do you do about it? And the devil's in the details. And as I said already, I'm not an admirer, for example, of hate speech laws, even though there's plenty of hateful speech, because I think the best thing to do is to leave free speech alone as much as you possibly can. Not because that will result in the perfect conditions for free speech, but because anything else that you're likely to do is going to make it worse rather than better.
And I really thought after the Orville, Seth MacFarlane had seen the value in everybody being united rather than being divided. If you want to get an organic utopia, you have to allow things to be free, and free doesn't always mean nice. Clearly, Seth MacFarlane's vision has been skewed from his ivory tower.
CNN, here's our panel. He hosts ESPN's First Take and the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast. Stephen A. Smith is over here. And he's a comedian, writer, and producer whose new series, Ted, is streaming on Peacock. Seth MacFarlane is over here. And the Democratic congressman from California, Adam Schiff. He's going to be the senator from California. Okay. All right, here's what people want to know. What are the panel's thoughts on the jury awarding, this happened just before we went on the air, the jury awarding E. Jean Carroll $83.3 million in damages in her suit against Donald Trump. Donald Trump, what do we think? Not good, right?
This was the suit that he got threatened to be thrown out of several times, right?
Right.
Like, how toxic do you have to be where you're too rude to be on trial for sexual assault?
Right.
I think it's true justice. The only thing he cares about is himself and money, and going after the money is a way to bring about some real justice.
Do you think he did it?
Yes, I do.
You do? You think he raped her in Bergdorf Goodman's?
I do, yeah.
You think he raped her in Bergdorf Goodman?
I have no idea. Here's what I will tell you. It means absolutely nothing. Doesn't mean a damn thing.
Right.
And I get tired of people trying to act like it. First of all, the man is running for president of the United States, and part of the reason he's running for it is because he's getting those campaign dollars so he can pick up the money to pay for his legal bills. That's what he's going to do. He's not going to lose any money. Secondly, it ain't going to be $83.3 million. He'll appeal it. It'll get knocked down. And I'm just getting tired of seeing so much stuff targeted in his direction, but somehow, some way, he still survives. I mean, we're talking about a situation where he's still going to be the GOP nominee. He's still going to be running for president. You're President Biden. That's the individual that you're going to have to beat. 4 indictments, 91 counts. They ain't even bringing up the bankruptcies. Ain't even bringing up this particular issue with this civil case. And somehow, some way, he puts cats to shame because he clearly has more than 9 lives. I mean, come on.
You bring up the most perfect disparity between these two people. It's like he cares about himself, he cares about money, and you have Joe Biden, who put forth the Inflation Reduction Act, which contains climate provisions that are going to probably bear fruit long after he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Long after he's gone.
Absolutely.
What does he have to gain by that? Nothing, except, God forbid I use the word altruism.
Yeah, well, you know, look, I don't share your pessimism about this or your pessimism about the general election. The reason why Joe Biden is going to beat Donald Trump is because at the end of the day, America is going to want a president who is a decent human being, who doesn't shit on other people, who has some interest in the American people, some interest in something beyond himself. I think at the end of the day, people are going to reject this bigoted, divisive figure. They're not going to want to put the country through 4 years of that.
They have every time except at one time. Yeah. No, really. I mean, he really lost every election except the 2016, and that, of course, he didn't really win that one either. I mean, he not the popular vote.
Right.
And I also, you know, I don't know whether he did it, but I don't put anything past him. I also think Bergdorf should have better security.
Has there been any point in history in which, not to say it's a cult, but has there been any point in history in which the same candidate has been put forth 3 times in a row, 3 elections in a row by the same party?
3 elections, that's a great question.
3 elections in a row.
It could have happened with, who's the guy?
Teddy Roosevelt.
But I guess
Franklin Roosevelt won 4 elections in a row. So there you go.
Yeah, but, you know, given the circumstances.
Right.
What were the circumstances? Well, there's always something going on in the country. You know? I mean, well, no, really, you can't do that. You can't be like, well, there's a war on. We have to stick with me. I mean, that doesn't work. It's a depression. Stick with me.
He lost the popular vote in both elections, but the bottom line is this. I respect the fact that you don't share my pessimism. I truly do. I understand where you're coming from. But I think that's part of the problem. I think the Democratic Party should share my pessimism. I think they should be on high alert. I think they need to treat him with the seriousness that it deserves, because you having a lot of faith in the American people. The man did get over 74 million votes. You've got people that are looking at Joe Biden. I'm not going to call him a cognitive mess or anything like that. That's very disrespectful. I would never speak about our president that way. But when you're 82 years of age, it's not offensive to say you're no longer a spring chicken and you don't seem to have the level of five and the energy that you once used to have. And so you take that into consideration. You take that into consideration. You can't ignore the fact that this man is a threat.
Oh, make no mistake. I take him as serious as a heart attack.
Okay.
I'm optimistic, but we're going to have to fight tooth and nail. And one of the biggest obstacles we're going to have to overcome is all the efforts to prevent people from voting.
Okay.
We're going to have to turn out our people. We're going to have to work like never before. We're going to have to work like our democracy is on the line, because it damn well is.
Right.
And I don't. So I take this as serious as a heart attack.
I'll just interject one thing into this discussion about Trump that we've been having all night. It was a question I was going to ask you. We ran out of time.
Sure.
The Atlantic put out an article last year, and it was called "Separating Sports by Sex Doesn't Make Sense."
Right.
And talked about how we separate sports like the WNBA and just because it's just socialization. This is insane.
I agree.
Okay. That's why people vote for Trump. Because there's stuff like that on the left that people just go, I know Trump's horrible, but separating sports by sex makes perfect sense. And if you think it doesn't, you can't lead the country.
That's cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Okay. I'm just giving you the answer to the question you're asking all night long. Why do they vote for Donald Trump? It's not always because they like him. No, it's because stuff like that is kookier to them. And there's lots of
It's kookier than trashing the Capitol? What the fuck?
Thinking, in a way it is. How is it? It's apples and oranges. It's apples and oranges. One is more evil, one is more horrible. But thinking that, I mean, what would happen if we combined the WNBA and the NBA?
No, please. Well, LeBron would go from averaging 25 to averaging 70. Because half the team, I mean, you mix it up, and he'd hold the ball and create the mismatch and take advantage of the mismatch.
You're both right, and it's. I'm gonna tell you something. Like when you donate to the Democratic Party, which I have, you get to do certain things, and I got to.
I didn't even get a thank you.
I got on a.
I gave him $1 million twice. I didn't get a.
I got on a Zoom.
Can I just say thank you?
Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you. I got on a Zoom with Biden for like 10 minutes. So you can talk to Biden for 10 minutes alone. Like, okay, great, wow.
That was AI Biden. That was not Biden.
Yeah. Trust me, it wasn't AI Biden. But what I took away from that was that, oh, this guy is not the world's greatest public speaker, but I'm now getting why people like Lindsey Graham are defending him and saying, like, if you don't like Joe Biden, there's something wrong with you, which you can look it up. He did say, I'm paraphrasing because I've had 100 drinks, but he did essentially say that, like, if you don't like Joe Biden as a person, there's something wrong with you. You need to look yourself in the mirror.
But there's a flip side, and here's the flip side. You can like Joe Biden, but hate Capitol Hill. As it has been for so many years. When you look at people, think about Trump. You ever watch Trump debate? This is why I was joking around and said I'd challenge him to a debate. What would I have to worry about? He doesn't say anything. He goes up against Democrats. It's going to be very, very good. It's going to be fabulous. But they watch. Wait and see. He hasn't said anything, right? And nobody on the Democratic side has, what is it? The pizzazz. I know you got the substance, but you've got a lot of people out there that are preoccupied with their own lives, and they want somebody that knows how to ingratiate
themselves with them. But that's what in debates is called a gish gallop.
Okay,
it's called a gish gallop.
I understand
it's when you disseminate so much bullshit, you're like Biff in Back to the Future, getting fucking dumped on by the manure truck.
But does it work?
If you think Trump doesn't say anything during a debate, you should see...
Well, now you tell me.
If you don't think Donald Trump says anything during debate, you should watch Steve Garvey.
You can't defend yourself against an onslaught of lies and bullshit. Where you have to
just said we're on CNN.
What is I'm on Fox. What's the difference?
I know, but we're not supposed to swear.
Really?
On CNN?
Yeah.
No. You're going to lose this gig for me. We got to go.
Yep, you heard it from Brian the drunk dog. I mean, Seth the drunk human. Red people are bad. Blue people are good. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and bargaining that I don't get any more illnesses and I don't have to have any more teeth pulled. I should be here next Friday as well. Hug your children. Have a wonderful weekend, folks. Good night.